All right, we want to take a brief look today at some of our location mapping capabilities here inside of RenderDraw for Salesforce. So we can utilize any kind of object inside of Salesforce. Most of the time we're taking a look at the location object. Oftentimes this is correlated to other objects, like in retail, for instance, there's an in-store location object that's adjacent to like a store and a location. In this case, it's just a demonstration showing off the location object, but just know we can utilize any kind of object inside of Salesforce. So inside of this, we wanted to take a look at our canvas and then how the canvas is set up. Our canvas is fully modular and utilizable across any kind of platform in Salesforce that includes digital experiences or internally, like we're seeing here. It is movable, it's zoomable. We have the ability to kind of pan, zoom in, zoom out how we see fit. But more importantly, we can relate elements on that canvas to data elements inside of Salesforce. And that gives us an overview of what's happening inside the location without having to actually go into the different records in the system and take a look at the database itself. So at a glance, we can understand what's happening in the location just based off of these areas that were put inside of the location itself. So let me move myself here over here. We mentioned it's movable. A canvas is draggable like this to where we can go to all different locations here. You can see this is a pretty big map and we only have a few elements mapped here, but pretty large area, and we need more information, more area than that. If we want to zoom out and get a better view, we can actually do that. Zoom in, same kind of functionality. We can also set the default zoom based off of when we set up the scene, which we'll get into in a moment, where the admin actually sets up these scenes. But at a glance, what we want to be able to show is different statuses of the data and the underlying representations of what we're seeing here. It's the overlays. So I've got about 10 different rooms here highlighted. You'll see some are represented as red, some are represented as green, and others are yellow with different status flags shown in the top right-hand corner. When we take a look at this, automatically we can use the stoplight metaphor where we know green is good, red is bad, yellow is there's some condition that's going on there. These colors can be changed to anything that we want, all based off the Salesforce data. But inside of this, what we'll take a look at, a few things, is when we hover and highlight elements, like let's say, for instance, this red flag yellow room here. When we hover and highlight, we can see the underlying room name and the location. This is just a Salesforce record in an object, what we call room. So this yellow region you're seeing has been related to room, and the status is its upcoming availability soon, less than 30 days. Highlight over this yellow area here, you'll see that the availability is immediate, hence it's got the green arrow or the green status indicator in the top right with a check mark. Now, if we want to navigate to that record, we can simply click on that, navigate to record, and it'll bring us up to the Salesforce record page that we were taking a look at. However, if we want to do some other kind of custom interaction, let's say we don't want to show that, we actually can show a custom flow as part of that overlay, that popover component that we have. And then in addition to that, we can also do some cool stuff with clicks themselves. So like when we click on the area, we can launch another overlay flow here. And in this case, we're using our 3D virtual tour component to take a look at the room itself. Sometimes this is applicable, other times it's not. We can launch any kind of screen flow from a click or a hover from when we take a look at and at a glance floor plan layout like what we're seeing. So let's take a step back and see how this was all set up. We're going to click on our Scene Director tab, and this is going to take us to our other Lightning component, which is meant to be used by a Salesforce administrator. The Salesforce admin is going to go in and set up the scene for every given location. So if you're running retail real estate environments, typically this is per location that we're going to be running on the real estate. Like in this case, it's a single floor for a real estate office company. But this is where we set up our underlying canvas. And we're going to see a lot of different options here, environmental options like the ability to set the background image, whether or not it's draggable, whether or not it's zoomable, things like hover actions. What are we going to show? In this case, we're showing the related record in Salesforce. Otherwise, we could show a custom pop-up. And then if we back out of this for a moment, we can also take a look at our layout actions. And this is where we're going to be setting up those status flags. So we click on related actions here. You can see on a click, we're going to be launching a Lightning flow. We've got all of our Lightning flows listed inside of our window here. So everything that's inside the Salesforce org, we have the ability to launch based off of this. And we will pass the related record ID over to that flow to where we can go and access specific information about this layout area. Now, on the data source side of things, when we say data source, we mean, hey, we're going to be going and pulling Salesforce records every time that this map gets pulled up. Those maps that we're going to be pulling up oftentimes are correlated with Salesforce data, and we want to have the ability to do different things based off of that data being different. So if it meets different statuses, if certain conditions are met or not met, we want to change colors, we want to change the opacity of things, we might want to change like an emoji, for instance, on what those look like. That's all going to be under data source actions. So two main conditions, whether or not something's in a result or not in a result. In a result, obviously, is we did a query inside the Salesforce system. Based off that query, we pulled back some records. If the related record is inside of that query, right, let's run these actions. If it's not in that query and it's still related to a Salesforce record, we would set up an action inside of the not in results. And we mean data source record. I mentioned we were binding to Salesforce data. That's here under edit data source. So you can see we're querying the room object. We're getting the room name, status, and location. And then based off of the query resource, the location, which would be the parent record, we're passing in the record ID that we're on right now. And we're saying if it equals that record ID, go ahead and pull it back. So inside of this, we're actually pulling all those information back, and you can see these conditions that we have set up here inside of our action items give us the ability to, based off of different conditions of that record coming back, go ahead and do something different. So in this case, if the status equals available, we're just going to simply add a green color to the underlying area. In action item 2, if it's rented, we're going to make it red. And then we have some kind of edge cases here where we want to do something more complex. So if the status is upcoming availability soon, less than 30 days, we're going to set that color to yellow, and then we're going to set the emoji to the top right and put a red flag to let users know, hey, something could be happening here. You might want to check it out. Something's coming available shortly. Our fourth conditional is, hey, immediate rental is coming up. It's not available right now, but it is upcoming soon, in less than 2 weeks. So you might want to start thinking about getting this rented out or leased out. So in this case, we're going to be changing that color to yellow, just like the last action item 2, and then setting the emoji to a green check mark. Now, all of these are configurable by Salesforce Administrator there. We can also change any kind of color that we want. We can change the opacity, and all of these are going to fire based off the conditions that are happening within the query. So once again, we're going to fire off that data query whenever the screen. Speaking of underlined records, let's go ahead and see how those are set up. Now, we have 2 ways to get there. One way we can go directly under the areas location, but my favorite way is making a selection here. And then because we're in our scene setup screen here, when we make a selection, you can see we're pulling up those details here on the side. Initially, we can name those areas. If we wanted to apply an overlay label to those, we could do so. It wouldn't make much sense here just because we have the underlying shapes. In this case, we've got an office furniture in there. So those might kind of collide and be confusing for the user. But as you can see, we have a base color and an underlying opacity set up, so we can still see what's happening behind that area, but we don't necessarily have to override it or make things a little bit more difficult to see. So we want to kind of edge off that opacity to make sure it's a little bit transparent. From there, we've got our record lookup component here. As you can see, we're related to that underlying room object that we created inside of Salesforce. And this one's related to room 1. So sequentially, room 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, all of these are automatically set up and connected to those records. So once those are set up, we are then doing that query on the Salesforce database and then pulling back information. And based off of those conditions, we can show an availability at a glance to where your users aren't going to have to sift through a lot of information in order to see spatially what's happening inside of the area. Now, how do we set up these areas? Well, we draw them. We have the ability to draw based off of clicks. So when we think about clicking, we can simply add the draw areas button here. So draw an area. Or if we've already established a drawn area and we want to adjust it a little bit, we can go back to our selection here, and you can see that we've got some nice handles that we can then adjust the sides of. So each one of these handles is fully adjustable. We can add in additional handles as well when we start thinking about adding in rooms that are non-standard square. For instance, this one down here, you can see we're nicely getting around the edge of this because we were able to make a selection. And then from that selection on the sidebar, we were able to add in an additional wall. So all of these are 100% geometrically capable of doing the odds and ends rooms or odds and areas inside of any kind of real estate or any kind of adjacent kind of structures that we were taking a look at. Now, a few other things we might want to consider. We have the ability to do free drawing on these areas or any canvas. When we made free drawing, basically we make a selection on a pen, we can adjust the pen settings and then go to town as far as making drawings here. This is really great for field service use cases or use cases where you're going to be using the Salesforce mobile app with an iPad or any kind of given template. So if we need to draw over any kind of thing, oftentimes we want to add in notes. Like if we're writing out measurements, for instance, we want to add in notes. We can also draw in walls as well. So when we think about actually drawing this structure, in this case, we're using a floor plan, which is super nice because obviously we don't have to draw any of the walls. But if we had to draw walls, we have the ability to draw those in, and then we can start writing comments based off of those drawn in walls. So, this is 14 feet, and then there's an electrical outlet here, something along those lines. And super powerful, we start thinking about collecting information from the field and then bringing it into something like an opportunity or any other kind of record flow that we want. But all this is available and it's toggleable as well. So if we want to shift something on or off based off of the type of user, the type of use case, all of that's right at our fingertips here in this admin defining component. In addition to doing handwriting, obviously my handwriting is horrible here. What we also want to take a look at is sticky notes. For us, a sticky note is exactly what you'd think it would be, something like a post-it note, where we can add in this note. Inside of that note, we have the ability to go in and edit the note by double clicking in and making a selection. And then from that double click, we can go in and change the information inside of that sticky note. So for instance, when we make a selection here, you can see we have a nice X. If we want to get rid of it, we get a confirmation that we do want to get rid of it. If we want to add in another one, we can make adjustments as we see fit. We can change the text to whatever we want, something along those lines. And then if we need to adjust the sizing, we can do that as well, to where we can make it smaller or larger and then position it according to where it needs to go, so it's relevant for the information that surrounds it. This is just kind of a brief look on how we take care of the layouts inside the Salesforce ecosystem. Most of the time we're importing 2D floor plans from a PDF, which we have utilities to do automatically. We can associate those information from the PDFs to records inside of Salesforce to really streamline the process, and then give that data source a little extra oomph by adding in these layout areas that can be dynamically data-driven at a glance to provide a lot of information and a lot of value right at our fingertips, all based off of Salesforce data.